10 years ago, I decided the sky was going to fail, and today it does. I have 4 hours before the last hatch on my floor seals itself, whether I'm ready or not. Every second after that costs me air I already paid for. I built 3 floors of this building into a machine and nobody noticed. Because the easiest way to hide a fortress is to make everyone think you're just a rich lunatic with too many locks on his door. That reputation cost me almost every friend I had. It was worth it. The rain has been going for 6 days straight. That's not unusual for this city in autumn. What's unusual is the pressure curve on my private weather station, the one bolted to my balcony that nobody in this building knows exists, dropping in a shape I've only ever seen in one dataset. The pre-collapse readings from the Siberian cold snap 3 years back, the one that killed 40,000 people before anyone called it a catastrophe instead of weather. I don't wait for confirmation. Confirmation is how people die. Arc, initiate full seal, I say, and the apartment answers in a voice I paid too much money to sound calm. Confirmed. Estimated seal time, 3 hours, 51 minutes. 17 access points remain open across floors 41 to 43. 17 points, 3 floors, 4 hours. That's the whole math of my life right now. I move through the building the way I've rehearsed it a dozen times in drills nobody else knew were drills, checking the water reclamation intake first. Because water is the one thing I cannot manufacture fast enough if the line freezes before I close it. The gauge reads 6,000 liters banked. Sealing the intake early costs me maybe 400 more liters I won't collect. I close it anyway. 4 hours from now, 400 liters won't matter. A frozen, cracked pipe will. The hydroponic bay is next. 11 trays of protein algae, 4 of actual vegetables, none of it glamorous, all of it the difference between rationing and starving in 6 months. I check the seals on the Grow Light's independent power loop, green across the board. The air scrubbers are the third thing, and the one I trust least, because I never got to test them against real outside air this cold. 2 redundant units, 1 primary. The primary can process air down to -30 before the intake risks icing. Below that, I switch to the backup loop, which is slower and burns twice the power. I run the numbers out loud, mostly to hear myself say them. Current battery bank, 340 kilowatt hours. Backup scrubber draw, roughly 6 kilowatts an hour if I ever need it full time. That's 56 days of scrubbing on backup power alone, before the solar array or the fuel cells even factor in. Enough to survive the worst month. Not enough to be careless. The building's shared network is the last thing I check, and the most important. 3 years ago, I paid a contractor triple his rate to reroute the entire complex's router hardware through a closet on floor 41 officially listed as storage. Nobody questioned it. Nobody questions rich men doing strange things with their own money. Now every camera in this building, every deleted message in the resident group chat, every private forward anyone thinks nobody else can see, all of it runs through a server sitting 11 meters from where I'm standing. I open the resident chat. Yunrim Towers, residents, 2,140 members. Right now it's mundane, someone complaining about slow elevators, someone else posting a photo of the rain. Nobody here knows what's coming. I know because I spent 10 years and most of my fortune making sure I would. At 4112 remaining on the seal clock, a maintenance technician steps out of the service elevator 2 floors below me. His badge says Park, Building Maintenance, floor coverage 38 to 45. He's not supposed to be here. His shift log has him assigned to the boiler room on 20. He's here because the boiler room's freezing and he came up looking for a supervisor. If he reaches my corridor, he sees 3 sealed steel doors where blueprints say there should be drywall. That's a problem I can't fix by asking nicely. I don't send security, I don't confront him. I open the building's internal work order system, another thing that routes through my closet, and generate an emergency ticket under his supervisor's login. Boiler failure, sub-basement 2, all available technicians required immediately. His radio crackles 30 seconds later. He swears, turns around, gets back in the elevator. He never looks at my corridor. Cost, nothing but 4 minutes of my attention and a ticket that'll confuse someone in payroll next month, assuming there's a next month with payroll in it. Worth every second. 2 floors down and 40 meters over, Choi Deoksu, head of building security, is doing what he does every evening, walking the lobby with a flashlight he doesn't need yet. Checking that the generator room is locked, nodding at residents like a man who has never once imagined his job could be anything other than routine. He radios a report to nobody in particular. All quiet. He has no idea that quiet has an expiration time now and that it's counting down 11 floors above his head. Back on my floor, I'm 3 access points away from full seal when the temperature outside drops 4 degrees in under 20 minutes. My weather station logs it in red. 4 degrees is not weather. 4 degrees is a door closing somewhere much bigger than this building. I call up the city grid overlay, another feed I shouldn't legally have access to, and do anyway. Rolling blackouts have already started 2 districts over. Not planned ones. The kind that happen when demand spikes past what a strained system can carry because everyone in the city just turned their heating up at once. 2 hours 40 minutes left on the seal. I make the last real decision of the day. I have exactly 1 shipment still outside the building, a case of surgical antibiotics. I've been slow walking through customs for 3 weeks, sitting in a courier van 4 blocks away, driver waiting on my confirmation to deliver. If I let him come, he sees the building's private freight elevator, which nobody outside my inner circle is supposed to know exists. If I don't, I finish this apocalypse with a med kit built for scraped knees, not for whatever's about to happen to 2,000 people with no heat. I authorize the delivery. I tell the driver to use the freight door, no lobby, straight to floor 41, and I overwrite his GPS log afterward so the delivery never shows up in the building's official records. 400 milligrams of amoxicillin per resident of this building would run out in a week. This case is not for the building. I haven't decided yet who it's for. I just know that having it and not needing it is better than needing it and not having it. The driver hands off 6 crates at the freight door without asking a single question because I overpay him specifically so he won't. I sign nothing. He forgets my face by the time the elevator doors close because I also overpay him for that. The whole exchange takes 90 seconds. 90 seconds is cheap for 6 crates of a resource I can't grow, brew, or filter out of rainwater. 1 hour, 11 minutes left on the clock, and my own phone buzzes not the building line, my real number, the one maybe 6 people alive still have. Park Junho. Old university roommate, the closest thing I've had to a friend in the last decade. Someone I quietly stopped answering 2 years ago because keeping this secret meant keeping distance from everyone who might ask why my lights never go dark during outages. Hey man, weird question. Power's out on my whole street. You seeing this on the news? You good? I read it twice. I could tell him. 1 message, 1 address, and Junho gets a door before the seal locks. I could still fit 1 more person through the freight elevator if I move in the next 40 minutes. I don't answer. Not because I don't care, because the math doesn't forgive sentiment yet. 1 extra body is 1 extra mouth for a system I haven't stress tested past the numbers on a spreadsheet, and I don't know his floor plan, his neighbors, who follows him if he suddenly disappears into a storage closet tower. I put the phone face down and go back to the seal checklist. I tell myself I'll explain it to him later, if there's a later where explaining still means something. The last door seals at 0:04 remaining, 4 minutes ahead of the machine's own estimate, because I stopped triple checking things I'd already checked twice. Full seal achieved, ARC tells me. External atmospheric temperature, -6 Celsius and falling. Internal systems nominal. -6. This morning it was 11 above 0. I opened the chat 1 more time before I let myself sit down for the first time in 6 hours. The first message hits at 9:47 p.m. Resident 19F. Does anyone else's radiator feel dead? Mine just stopped. Then another, 3 minutes later. Resident, 33 degrees Celsius. Same. And my phone says it's -8 outside now? That can't be right. Then 5 messages in under a minute, then 12. Then the counter on unread. Messages starts climbing faster than I can read it. And somewhere in that pileup, underneath the panic, underneath people asking each other if this is a joke, I already know the answer nobody's said yet. It's not a joke. It's Tuesday, and I'm the only person in this building who knew it was coming. 22 hours since the seal. Outside, the thermometer reads -14 and hasn't stopped falling since midnight. Inside my 3 floors, everything still hums the way I built it to hum. 2,140 people 2 floors and further down mine are finding out in real time what it feels like to lose heat, water, and light at once. I don't leave my floor. I don't need to. Everything that matters is already on a screen in front of me. The resident chat used to be a place for noise complaints and lost cats. Now it refreshes faster than I can read it, and somewhere in that noise is the only map of this building I actually need: who's organizing, who's panicking, who's about to become dangerous. Resident 12B. Anyone have blankets to spare? My kids are freezing. Resident 27. A. Building MGMT not answering. Anyone seen the super? Resident 8F. My neighbor says the whole grid's down for miles. This isn't just us. By hour 26, a name I recognize starts posting with a different tone than everyone else. Choi Deoksu, former head of building security, now signing every message emergency response coordinator like the title existed before yesterday. It didn't. He gave it to himself sometime overnight, and nobody's in a position to argue with the man holding the master key to the supply closets. Choi Deoksu, please remain calm. I am organizing a temporary resident council to manage food, water, and medical resources until city services resume. All residents report to the lobby at 10 a.m. for headcount and role assignment. Role assignment. I read that phrase twice. 2 days ago, it would have meant nothing. Today, it's the first brick of a government nobody voted for, built out of a man who spent 15 years checking badges at a front desk and just discovered that in a building with no police, no elevators, and no way out, a badge checker with keys to the food storage is the closest thing to a king this place has. I don't interfere. Not yet. I watch. By hour 30, a second name starts moving through the chat differently, not posting much, but referenced constantly. Ma Gyung-ho, who ran door security at the nightclub on the ground floor, has apparently spent the blackout gathering every bouncer, doorman, and off-duty enforcer who used to work his floor into one group. Someone posts a photo, blurry, taken through a stairwell door, 6 men in matching black jackets moving crates out of the ground floor convenience store. Nobody in the photo looks like they're asking permission. Resident 41C. Is that Gyung-ho's crew? Are they just taking whatever they want now? The message gets 4 replies and then silence. Nobody wants to be the one who says it louder. This is the part of the plan I actually built for not the seal, not the water, not the food. Any engineer can stockpile supplies. What I spent 10 years learning to read is this: the exact moment a building full of strangers stops being neighbors and starts sorting itself into whoever has resources and whoever needs them. That moment is happening right now, 2 floors below me, and I have a front row seat nobody else in this building knows exists. I open a terminal window and create my first account. Not under my name, under a burner identity I built years ago and never used, tied to a phone number that traces to nowhere. I call it resident_watcher. No profile photo, no history, just a voice in the noise. I don't lie yet. Lying too early gets noticed. I test something smaller. First, I want to know how fast a piece of information moves through this crowd and how much I can shape where people look without them knowing they've been steered. Resident_watcher. Heard from someone on 30 that the shelter agency is setting up a supply drop at the East Gate tomorrow morning. Might be worth some people going to check. There is no shelter agency. There is no supply drop. It takes 11 minutes for someone to reply, really? Does anyone know more? 19 minutes for the rumor to spread past the first screen of messages? And 40 minutes before Choi Deoksu himself posts an official-sounding correction telling everyone to disregard unverified rumors and stay in the lobby for headcount instead. 40 minutes. That's how long it takes one unverified sentence from a stranger to pull attention across an entire building and make an actual authority figure spend his own credibility correcting it. I write the number down. It's the most useful data point I've collected all day. 3 floors below and a hallway over, Choi Deoksu stands in front of a whiteboard someone dragged up from the management office, writing names under headers he invented an hour ago: security, supply, medical, with the seriousness of a man who has never before been allowed to draw a line and call it policy. He doesn't know the shelter rumor came from nowhere. He only knows it cost him 40 minutes and made him look for the first time like someone worth listening to when he shut it down. He underlines medical twice. At hour 38, someone posts a photo that makes my stomach drop half a second before my brain catches up with why. Resident 19F. This is gonna sound crazy, but does anyone else see lights on the top floors? Like actual lights, not emergency ones. There's a photo attached. Grainy, taken from across the courtyard, aimed up at my building. You can just make out a warm rectangle of window glow against 3 floors of total darkness. My floor, my window. I checked the blinds closed, but not blackout sealed, because 6 hours ago, I didn't think anyone outside would still be looking up. I have maybe 90 seconds before this photo gets 40 replies instead of 4. Option 1, delete it. I have admin level access to this chat through the router closet. I could scrub the message and the photo in under 10 seconds. But deleted messages leave a trace even in a chat this size, and someone always screenshots first. A deletion this fast, this specific, would tell whoever's paying attention that someone with real control over this network doesn't want people looking at my floor. That's a worse leak than the photo itself. Option 2, bury it. I don't touch the message. Instead, from a second burner account I've never used before now, I post something louder, faster, and more urgent 30 seconds later. Hyunrim_resident4. Does anyone have a first aid kit? My dad just fell on the ice stairs and is bleeding pretty bad. We're on 6th floor. Please, someone with medical training. It's not entirely a lie. There really is a resident on 6 with a minor laceration. I can see it on the hallway camera feed. A small enough injury that nobody's actually in danger, but real enough that if anyone checks, the story holds. It works exactly the way I need it to. Fear for a bleeding stranger outweighs curiosity about a light in a window. 40 replies pile onto the fake emergency in the time it takes the light photo to get 3. I mute my own Windows glow 20 minutes later with actual blackout film. Quietly, calmly, once the crisis has already moved everyone's attention somewhere else. No panic, no deleted evidence. Just a problem that solved itself in the noise. The way problems always do if you're patient enough to let the noise do the work instead of your own hands. Cost? Nothing but a second burned account and one manufactured false alarm that made someone's night slightly more frightening than it needed to be. I note that too. Not because it changes what I'll do next time it won't, but because I want to know exactly what this is costing, even the costs I'm not planning to pay back. By hour 44, Deoksu's headcount board has a category I haven't seen before. Specialists. Under it, 4 names, added within the last hour, each with a location and, disturbingly, an assignment status instead of a name badge number. Choi Deoksu. Attention all residents. As part of our emergency resource plan, individuals with medical, engineering, or security backgrounds are asked to report to the resident council for essential duty assignment. This is not optional during the emergency period. Compliance keeps supply priority. Compliance keeps supply priority. 4 words that just turned every skilled person in this building into conscripted labor, dressed up in the language of a company memo. I scroll the growing list of specialists out of professional interest more than anything else, and stop cold on the 3rd name. Medical Han Jisoo, surgeon, general hospital reporting status. Assigned, floor 3 clinic, escort dispatched, not asked to come, escorted. I don't know her, I've never met her. But I know exactly what escort dispatched means from a man who spent one day discovering what a badge and a supply closet can do to people who have nowhere else to go. And I know exactly what kind of injury my own systems are eventually going to produce that no amount of stockpiled gauze will fix by itself. I close the laptop, open it again, and start reading everything the building's cameras have on file about the clinic on floor 3. The filtration line on floor 42 fails at hour 51, and it fails the way I feared it would not. The pipe's fine. But the pressure valve controlling it snaps under a cold stress fracture nobody rated for -20. Water sprays sideways across a service corridor at 40 pounds per square inch and catches my forearm on the way past. By the time I get the manual shutoff closed, I'm bleeding from a 2-inch gash and my sleeve is already freezing stiff against the skin. I have a full trauma kit. I also have 0 surgical training beyond what a survival manual and 3 YouTube videos can teach a man who has never needed stitches in his life. I clean it, I press gauze on it, I keep working, and 40 minutes later, the wound is still weeping through the bandage, and my hand doesn't close all the way anymore. That's not a scraped knee injury. That's a nerve or a tendon, and I don't know which, and guessing wrong here costs me a working hand for the rest of however long this lasts. I need a real doctor. There's exactly one in this building I know the location of, and she's not free to walk in the front door. Ledger, 51 hours in, battery reserve, 312 kilowatt hours, water banked 5,640 liters, 1 working hand currently in question. I pull up the floor, 3 clinic feet again. Hanjisu is exactly where the specialist board said she'd be, working under a single battery lantern, treating a line of people with frostbite and stress injuries with a kit that looks half empty already. 2 of Choi Deoksu's men stand by the door, not guarding her from danger, guarding her from leaving. Getting her out the front door means walking past two armed men and a lobby full of people who now report every unfamiliar face straight to the resident council. That's not an extraction, that's a hostage negotiation I'd lose. I need the building itself to move her for me. Deoksu's whole operation runs on fear of two things: starvation and violence. I already know which lever moves him faster. From a new burner account I post into a private subthread, I know two of Deoksu's own security team monitor a channel meant for reporting theft and hoarding. Hyunrim_watch7 just saw like 8 guys moving crates and what looked like kitchen knives up the north stairwell toward floor 19 didn't look like resident council people. Might be trouble, it isn't true. There is no group on floor 19. But floor 19 sits on the opposite end of the building from the clinic. Up 2 flights that funnel through a single stairwell, exactly the kind of choke point a security chief with delusions of command would want personally handled before it becomes a riot he can't contain. I know this because I spent 3 days last spring, before any of this happened, quietly mapping which corridors this building's paranoid new king would consider a command priority. Some purchases in life are insurance. That map was one of them. 9 minutes later, both guards outside the clinic get a radio call. I can't hear it, but I don't need to. I watch them both leave at a jog, weapons up, headed for a fight that doesn't exist. The window is maybe 6 minutes before someone notices floor 19 is empty of chaos, and someone else notices the clinic is empty of guards. I move. I don't go through the corridor. I go through the maintenance shaft that runs behind the clinic wall, one of 41 access points across this building that show up on no floor plan issued after 2019. Because I paid to have them scrubbed from the public building registry the same year I bought my first unit here. The shaft dumps into a supply closet 6 feet from where Han Jisoo is stitching a laceration on a teenager's palm. She doesn't scream when I open the closet door. She goes still, scalpel still in hand, and looks at me the way a person looks at a math problem they don't like the answer to yet. "You're the guy from the top floors," she says. "Not a question. I need a working right hand and I don't have the training to fix it myself," I say. "You have 4 minutes before those 2 men come back, less if I'm wrong about how far floor 19 is from here." And why exactly would I go anywhere with a stranger who apparently knows this building better than the people running it? I don't waste the 4 minutes lying to her. Because in about 90 seconds, someone is going to realize the guards left this door unguarded, and the first thing Deoksu does with an unguarded asset is put a second set of eyes on it, permanently. You leave with me, or you spend the rest of this catastrophe as property with a supply priority stamp on your file. Those are the only 2 doors open to you right now, and I only control one of them. She looks at the teenager's half-stitched hand, at the door, at me. 3 seconds, not 4. "Finish this first," she says, already threading the last suture. I don't leave a job half done. She finishes it in under a minute, wraps the boy's hand, tells him to keep pressure on it, and follows me into the shaft without another question, which tells me more about her than anything she could have said out loud. The trip back takes 11 minutes through service ducts too narrow to stand up in, and neither of us talks until the last hatch seals behind us and floor 41's warmth hits like a wall. She looks around at lit hallways, running water, a working thermostat, and her face does something I've seen before on people discovering exactly how much has been kept from them. "There are heated floors in this building," she says, "the whole time. People downstairs are burning furniture, and there are heated floors." Yes, and you knew this was coming. Not guessed, knew. I built for it. 10 years of building for it. She sets her bag down, hard, on the counter of what used to be a show kitchen and is now a working one. "So walk me through what just happened. You needed a surgeon. You didn't ask the council for one, didn't offer anything in trade, didn't even knock on my door and explain the situation like a person. You engineered a fake riot, pulled armed men off me, and pulled me out through a service shaft like I was cargo you'd already paid for. I got you out. You extracted me. There's a difference, and you know it, or you wouldn't have gone through this much trouble to avoid the front door." She holds up her hand, the one that's still faintly shaking. "You didn't rescue me because it was right. You rescued me because you have exactly one working hand and you needed someone who could fix it without asking too many questions afterward. Don't dress it up as anything else in front of me. I've spent 2 days watching men decide what women in this building are worth in trade. I know exactly what I am to you right now. I'm useful. I don't correct her because she isn't wrong, and I've never once lied about what I am. The wound's on my right forearm. Tendon, I think, not sure which one. I'd like it looked at before it decides for me. She's quiet for a second, long enough that I think she might refuse just to prove the point, and then she picks the bag back up. Sit down. Sleeve off. And for what it's worth, being useful doesn't mean I'll stop telling you exactly what you are while I'm being it. She works fast, hands steady despite everything, and doesn't speak again until the last stitch closes. 6 sutures, full mobility test, a nod that says it'll heal clean if I don't reopen it doing something stupid in the next week. While she cleans her tools, I pull up the hallway camera bank out of habit more than need checking. The perimeter is the last thing I do before I let myself stop moving for the day. Floor 6, corridor camera, a face in the crowd waiting outside what's left of the pharmacy line. I don't know the name. Jisoo, glancing over my shoulder while she packs her kit, does. That's Yeren, she says, voice dropping. She did her residency 2 years under me. She has a 4-year-old. She looks longer than the moment needs. She's not on any specialist list. Nobody's coming for her. Neither of us says the rest of it out loud. I already know what it means, and so does she, that the same math that pulled her out through a service shaft an hour ago doesn't extend automatically to everyone else standing in that line, and that from here on, every name on every camera feed is a decision I haven't made yet. 70 hours in, and the building has already grown its first warlord. Park Do-yeon used to run parking garage security on the night shift, the kind of job where the biggest decision of your day is whether to write up a resident for double parking. 3 days without power turned him into something else. He pulled together 5 other men from his old shift roster, bored, cold, and suddenly aware that nobody with a badge outranks them anymore, and by hour 60, they'd planted themselves on the 14th floor landing with 2 space heaters looted from a gym and a handwritten sign. Taped to the stairwell door. Toll for passage. Food or warmth only. He doesn't call it what it is. In his head, this is order. Somebody has to control the stairs or people will trample each other going for supplies. And if somebody has to do it, why not the 6 men who already know how to hold a line? He tells himself this while his crew shakes down an elderly couple for half a bag of rice just to let them pass to the floor where their daughter lives. He believes it while he does it. That's usually how it starts. I only find out because Jisoo, 3 days into living on my floor and still not fully forgiving me for the shaft extraction, starts monitoring the chat for anyone matching Yeren's situation. People with no leverage, no specialist tag, nobody coming for them. She flags a thread to me without a word, just turns the laptop. Resident, 14D. They're charging us to use our own stairwell. My mother needs her heart meds from the pharmacy on 6, and they want a can of food we don't have. That's not a toll booth, Jisoo says. That's a checkpoint. Give it a week and it's a wall. I'm already tracking something else that makes the 14th floor matter more than one bad checkpoint. 2 nights ago, I started routing supplies to a name I hadn't expected to find useful this early, Yoon Sera, a police officer 3 floors down who's been quietly organizing something that isn't quite a resistance yet, more a habit of checking on people nobody else checks on. I don't know her. I know her pattern, the way I know everyone's pattern now, from 6 days of watching this building through 40 cameras. She's the only person in this building moving supplies toward people instead of away from them, and that makes her worth keeping alive without her ever knowing I'm the reason. I route a small courier package her way tonight, water purification tablets and a working radio, dropped through a maintenance chute 2 floors below hers, no note, no name. It's supposed to be untraceable. It isn't quite. Do-yeon's crew has eyes on every stairwell junction between floors 10 and 16 now, and the courier a teenage kid Sarah's been using, paid in nothing but the promise of extra rations, gets stopped 4 floors early. I watch it happen on the stairwell camera in real time. 6 against 1 kid holding a bag. They take the radio, the tablets, and shove him hard enough that he goes down 2 steps before catching the rail. That's the moment this stops being an abstract problem on a floor plan. Ledger. Courier package lost water tablets 40 units, 1 field radio. Cost of doing nothing about it. Whatever Sarah's group needs those for, they now don't have. I don't send anyone to fight 6 armed men. I don't have anyone to send who wouldn't die trying. What I have is information, and information, aimed correctly, is the only weapon in this building that scales. I already know Ma Kyung-ho's crew has spent 2 days quietly asking around about anyone hoarding fuel. Because a rumor's been circulating, one I helped along 4 hours ago from a burner account that somewhere in the building sits an untouched backup generator nobody's claimed. Kyung-ho wants that generator badly enough to have men checking 3 separate floors already. Do-yeon's checkpoint sits on 14. I know for a fact because I own the building schematics nobody else does that. 14 has an old mechanical room behind the stairwell wall that used to house a decommissioned emergency generator. Stripped for parts years ago and never logged as removed in the public records. On paper, it still exists. On paper, it's exactly the kind of thing 6 armed men going door to door for fuel would kill to be first to find. From a fresh account, timed to land right after Gyongho's crew finishes their shift briefing, I drop it into a channel I know 2 of his lieutenants read. Hyunrim_tips. Heard the guys camping the 14th floor stairwell have a whole generator stashed in the old mechanical room back there. That's probably why they're guarding that spot so hard and not somewhere with more foot traffic. I don't say kill them. I don't say anything that isn't technically just a tip about a location. What happens next isn't my hand on anyone's throat. It's 6 men who spent 3 days deciding they were the strongest thing on their floor, about to meet 40 men who spent 3 days deciding the same thing about the whole building. It happens sometime after midnight, in the dead hour when the building's noise finally drops low enough that a fight 2 floors down carries faintly up the stairwell shafts. I don't watch it live by the time I check the corridor camera on 14. It's already over. 2 space heaters overturned, a toll for passage sign torn in half on the floor. No bodies left where cameras can find them, which tells me Gyongho's people know exactly how to make 6 men disappear from a building that already has no working police, no morgue, and no one keeping count. By morning, the 14th floor stairwell is just a stairwell again. Someone posts in the chat, almost cheerful with relief. Resident 14. D. The toll guys are gone? Stairwell's clear. Finally, Do-yeon never learns who sent Jongho's crew to his door. He spends whatever his last minutes are, most likely, assuming the men killing him are just stronger, never realizing the only reason they knew exactly where to look. Exactly when his floor was thin on defenders, exactly what story to believe about what he was hiding is a stranger 3 floors up who never met him and never will. I close the feed. I don't feel good about it. I don't feel bad either, which is its own kind of unsettling if I let myself sit in it too long, so I don't. Jisoo finds me in the medical bay an hour later, restocking gauze that doesn't need restocking yet because my hands need something to do that isn't a keyboard. You didn't tell me you were going to do that, she says, not accusing, just stating it. You'd have told me not to. Probably. She sits on the counter across from me, tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. 6 men are dead because you pointed a wolf pack at them instead of a knife. They took a bag of water tablets off a kid and threw him down a stairwell for it. In 3 more days, they'd have started taking more than bags. She doesn't argue that part. She just looks at her own hands for a while. The ones that spent the last 2 days stitching frostbite and shrapnel wounds on people who trusted the wrong men to keep them safe. I keep waiting to be angrier at you than I am, she says eventually. I was that first night. I still think what you did to get me out was cold and calculated, and you'd do it again to anyone if the math worked out the same way. I would. I know, and I still came down here instead of going straight to bed, so make of that whatever you want. She almost smiles, the first one I've seen from her. For what it's worth, the kid with the radio. Is he okay? I pull up the feed without being asked. Bruised, limping, but walking under his own power, already being fussed over by 2 neighbors on his landing. He's fine. Good, she says. And for a moment, neither of us says anything else, which is, strangely, the first quiet minute either of us has had since this started. It doesn't last. 40 minutes later, a new thread starts climbing the chat faster than anything since the blackout itself, started by an account I don't recognize and can't trace back to any resident registry. Guardian _of_the flame. The cold did not come by accident, it came to test us. Those with light in their homes while we freeze are not thieves, they are chosen. I have seen it. The Guardian shows me the tower above and it burns warm while we suffer below. This is not cruelty. This is a sign. Jisoo reads it over my shoulder, and neither of us says the word out loud yet, but I already know exactly what kind of problem this is going to become. 96 hours in, and the building has settled into something like a bad routine. People still die, but slower now, in the background, instead of all at once. That's what passes for progress here. Jisoo and I spend most of the morning doing something that isn't survival for once building. The hydroponic bay was never designed with medicine in mind, but she spent 2 days going through what's growing in there with a clinician's eye instead of a farmer's. And this morning she hands me a list. Willow bark in tray 6 is basically free aspirin if I process it right, she says. The mint's useless for calories, but I can make a decent antiseptic wash from it. And if you let me convert half of tray 9 to actual medicinal herbs instead of more lettuce, I can stretch what's left in my kit by weeks instead of days. Half of tray 9 is 4% of our caloric yield. Half of tray 9 is the difference between me treating an infection and me watching it become sepsis because I ran out of gauze. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to anymore. 3 days of watching her work has taught me her math is usually better than mine when the variable is a human body instead of a spreadsheet. I give her the tray. It's the first resource decision in a week I make because someone convinced me, not because I calculated it alone, and it takes me a full minute afterward to notice how strange that feels. The trade-off shows up faster than either of us expects, from a direction neither of us saw coming. Floor 22 has a problem the chat's been dancing around for a day without naming it directly. Someone up there has started picking locks, not breaking doors, picking them, clean and quiet, on units whose owners fled to relatives before the freeze or simply aren't answering anymore. By the time residents on that floor put it together, half the empty units have already been stripped of anything valuable. Resident 22A, somebody's going door to door and getting in without breaking anything. This isn't random. This is someone who actually knows how to pick locks. The someone is Lim Jae-sok, building locksmith. The man every resident on that floor used to call when they got shut out of their own apartment after one too many drinks. 3 days of chaos taught him something about himself he apparently likes, that the skill everyone once treated as a minor inconvenience fixer is, in a building with no security left to stop him, closer to a master key to the entire tower. By hour 98, he's stopped hiding it. He posts openly under his own name, daring anyone to try to stop him. Lim Jae-sok. Every door in this building opens for me if I want it to. I've been quiet about it because I didn't need to be loud. Starting today, floor 22 pays me 1 meal a day per unit, or every single lock on this floor gets opened whether you're home or not. I know which units have kids. I know which units have people sleeping alone. Think about that before you decide I'm bluffing. It's not subtle extortion. It's a threat aimed specifically at the people least able to defend against it, and it works exactly the way threats like that always work. 3 units pay within the hour, terrified into it, and the rest wait to see if someone else fixes the problem for them. Jisoo reads it standing over my shoulder, jaw tight. This one's worse than the stairwell toll. Doyeon wanted food. This one's telling women alone with kids that their locked door isn't actually locked. I know. So what's the plan? Point Ga Young-ho's crew at him too? I've already thought about that and ruled it out. Young-ho's people are getting harder to bait with rumors alone after the 14th floor. Someone in his crew has started double-checking tips before acting on them, which means my last generator story worked exactly once and won't work twice. I need a different lever, and I've already watched exactly which lever moves fastest and asks the fewest questions. The Guardian channel has grown from one account posting scripture at empty air to something closer to 40 active followers in 4 days, led by a man calling himself John Ireon, who's built an entire theology out of a cold snap and a lit window. His followers have started calling anything unexplained a sign, anything cruel a test, and anyone who takes without earning it a demon wearing a person's face. I don't need to invent a demon. I just need to point at one who's already behaving like one. From the last burner account, I still trust my first one, resident_watcher, quiet since the shelter rumor days ago. I drop a single message into the Guardian channel. Timed for the hour their nightly gathering usually peaks, resident_watcher. The locksmith on 22 isn't just a thief. Think about it. No door in this building has kept him out once, not one, like something's letting him through. He opens locks the Guardian sealed for us and takes from families with children while they sleep. That's not a skill. That's a demon wearing a maintenance badge. I don't write another word after that. I don't need to. 40 people primed for 4 days to see meaning in coincidence do the rest of the work themselves, faster and louder than I could have pushed it alone. Guardian_of_the_flame. The Guardian shows me clearly now, the one who opens what should stay closed, the one who takes from the helpless while they sleep. This is the demon spoken of. We do not wait for it to come to us. I watch the channel's plan take shape in real time, not a whisper anymore. An organized march, torches made from wrapped cloth and lighter fluid. 30-some people moving up the north stairwell toward floor 22 with the calm certainty of people who've decided their God already told them the outcome. I could stop it. I have exactly enough time to send Deoksu's security a real tip about Jae-sok before the crowd arrives, and for a few seconds I actually weigh it not out of mercy for Jae-sok, who's earned none, but because a mob execution is a louder, messier, harder thing to have set in motion than a quiet arrest. I don't send it in time. I tell myself it's because the window closes too fast to be sure Deoksu's men would even move on it. That's true. It's also not the only reason, and I know it. The crowd reaches floor 22 9 minutes before Deoksu's security does. What happens in those 9 minutes doesn't make it onto any camera clearly enough to describe, and by the time security arrives, there's nothing left to arrest. By morning, the chat carries two very different stories about the same 9 minutes, one that calls it justice, one that calls it murder, and Johnny Rain's channel has grown by another 60 followers overnight, emboldened, certain now that the Guardian doesn't just speak, it acts through them. Ledger. Burner account resident_watcher retired. No longer usable. One less voice I can wear before someone starts asking who's been wearing all of them. Jisoo doesn't say anything when I tell her what happened. She's quiet for a long time, longer than after the stairwell. You didn't send an armed gang after him this time, she finally says. You sent 40 people who think they're following a god. He was doing worse to more people every day he kept going. I'm not arguing that he deserved to be stopped. She looks at me directly, the way she does when she wants to be sure I actually hear the next part instead of just processing it. I'm telling you there's a difference between removing a threat and handing your problems to whoever's angriest and easiest to point. You're running out of gangs to aim. Now you're aiming a religion. What do you aim when you run out of that too? I don't have an answer for her, not one I'm willing to say out loud yet, so I don't try. It's Jisoo who spots the next thread, an hour later, scrolling the council's official channel out of habit more than expectation. Choi Deoksu, given continued strain on food reserves, the resident council will begin a formal needs assessment. Priority allocation will favor residents capable of contributing to building operations, security, medical, engineering, supply runs. A full list of non-contributing residents will be compiled by end of week for review. Non-contributing residents. Jisoo reads it twice, then looks at me, and I already know exactly whose name is going to end up on a list like that. First, someone with no skill this building's new government considers worth a ration. The non-contributing list goes up on hour 108, pinned to the resident chat by Choi Deoksu himself, 41 names long, sorted by floor. I read it the way I read everything now, looking for who's about to become a problem I'll have to solve later if I don't solve it now. Third name from the top, Park Yoon-chae, 30th floor, wheelchair user, no listed occupation. There's no accusation attached to her name. No crime, no hoarding, no violence, just a category non-contributing sitting next to her name like a verdict already passed. I pull her file out of the building registry out of habit, expecting to find some reason to care beyond the obvious one. There isn't one. She doesn't fix anything, defend anything, or heal anyone. She has, by every metric I've spent 10 years training myself to calculate, exactly zero strategic value to a bunker built around keeping the maximum number of the right people alive the longest. I close the file and don't do anything about it because I don't have a reason to, and I tell myself that's the end of it. It isn't the end of it because 3 floors below her, a different kind of math is happening. 3 men, Yang Min-soo, Cho Hyun-woo, and Baek Tae-jin, all former mid-level managers at companies that stopped mattering the moment the power went out, have spent the last 5 days discovering the same thing Do-yeon discovered before Kyung-ho's crew. Erased him. That a title and a group of scared, obedient people is easier to build than anyone ever told them in a corporate office. They call themselves nothing official. Everyone on 30 just calls them the Kings, half in mockery, half because nobody's brave enough to correct them to their faces. They don't run a toll booth. They run something worse, a rotating shakedown that moves floor to floor on 29 through 31, taking whatever's easiest to take, backed by 6 men with kitchen knives and a stolen fire axe. And today, after watching the non-contributing list circulate, one of them gets an idea he thinks is clever. Cho Hyun-woo, in a private thread I only find because I'm still monitoring every channel on this floor. Everyone keeps talking about storming the top floors. Nobody's tried because nobody wants to walk into whatever traps that guy's got rigged up there. But what if we send someone up first that he can't shoot at? The girl in the wheelchair on 30, she's already on the useless list. Nobody's gonna miss her. We push her through first, see what traps trigger. Then we go in behind her. I read it twice before the meaning fully lands, then a third time to be sure I'm not misreading the calm, business-like tone of a man describing using a disabled woman as a human minesweeper. They come for her 20 minutes later. I watch it on the hallway camera, 3 of them at her door, one holding the fire axe loose at his side like a prop meant to make the threat obvious without needing to say it out loud. She doesn't open the door for them. It doesn't matter. Cho Hyun-woo puts the axe through the frame on the second swing. Every rational argument I've built this entire operation on says this isn't my problem to solve personally. I have Sarah's people 3 floors below who could, in theory, respond faster than I can reach 30 through any shaft I know. I have anonymous accounts and rumors and gangs I could point at, this the way I've pointed them at every threat so far. Every version of the plan that's kept me alive and untouched for a week says, work the angle, don't walk in the door, I don't work the angle. I'm already moving toward the maintenance shaft before I've finished deciding to, and it isn't until I'm 3 floors down, moving faster than I've moved since the seal, that I actually try to explain it to myself and fail. She has no function. She fixes nothing. There is no version of my own ledger where this decision balances, and I go anyway, and some small, unfamiliar part of my mind notes, almost curious, that I've stopped needing the ledger to balance before I act. The shaft dumps me into a utility closet 2 doors down from her unit. By the time I get the door open, they've already got her out of the chair and half dragged into the hallway, Cho Hyun-woo in front holding her by the arm like a shield he's already decided to use. The other 2 behind him with the axe and a kitchen knife, moving her toward the stairwell that leads up. I don't have a weapon that matches theirs. I have 3 years of studying exactly how buildings like this one fail structurally, and I have the one advantage none of them know I'm carrying. I control every door, every light, and every camera on this floor from a device in my coat pocket. I kill the hallway lights first. Not all of them, just the 6 between me and them, plunging that stretch of corridor into total dark while leaving the stairwell behind them lit, so their instinct is to keep moving forward, toward the light, away from whatever just went wrong behind them. Let go of her, I say, from somewhere in the dark they can't pinpoint yet, and I make sure my voice carries flat and even, nothing performative in it. Because performance is what men like this expect, and calm is what actually unsettles people who've spent 5 days getting used to being the scariest thing in a hallway. Who's talking? Baek Tae-jin says, voice higher than he probably wants it to be. The person whose floor you were about to walk her onto as a shield. I let that land for a second. You've spent 5 days deciding you're the strongest thing on this floor. You're about to find out how that math changes when the person you're threatening isn't scared of your axe. Cho Hyun-woo laughs, but it's thin. Big talk from a voice in the dark. Come out here and say it. I do. I step into the one working light left in that stretch of hallway, close enough now that they can see my face for the first time. Close enough that Yoon-chae, half pinned against Cho Hyun-woo's grip, looks at me with an expression I don't have time to read yet. I don't have a knife. I don't have a gun. What I have is 3 years of building this exact hallway to fail on command, and I trigger it now, a section of drop ceiling panel behind the 3rd man, rigged years ago as an access point and never once used for anything but maintenance, drops with enough noise and enough debris to make all 3 of them flinch and half turn at once. That's all the opening I need. I close the distance on Cho Hyun-woo before he resets his grip, drive my full weight into his knife arm before the blade can come up, and put him into the wall hard enough that Yoon-chae's arm comes free. Baek Tae-jin swings the axe wide and wild, more panic than skill, and I let it pass close enough to feel the air off it before I get inside his reach and put him down with the flat combination of moves I paid a private instructor to drill into me for exactly a scenario I hoped I'd never actually need. The 3rd man doesn't wait to find out what happens to him. He runs. Cho Hyun-woo doesn't get back up fast enough. I make sure of that. Yoon-chae stares at me from the floor where she landed when they let go of her, breathing hard, more furious than frightened, which tells me something about her I wouldn't have gotten from a file. You didn't have to do that yourself, she says. You could have sent someone. I know. So why did you? I don't have the answer she's looking for, and I don't lie to her either. I don't know yet. I'm still working that out. She studies me for a second longer than is comfortable, then holds a hand up, unbothered by the blood on my knuckles. Waiting for help back into a chair that's 3 doors down and badly dented from an axe blow. Well, while you're working it out, my chair's back there, and I'd rather not spend my dramatic rescue sitting on a hallway floor. By the time I get her settled on my own floor an hour later, the story of what happened on 30 is already spreading faster than anything I've engineered on purpose. Nobody names me directly, nobody has a name to attach yet, but the shape of it moves through the chat in under 30 minutes. The man from the top floors came down himself. Resident 9E. Okay, so it's real. Someone actually saw him. He's not just cameras and rumors. He came down and beat 3 of the 30th floor guys barehanded, Guardian _the flame. The Guardian does not send servants for everything. Sometimes it walks among us. I read that last one twice, and for the first time since this started, I feel something closer to dread than satisfaction at how fast a story about me is moving through a building I've spent a week trying to stay invisible in. The story of the man who came down himself doesn't fade the way I hoped it would. By hour 1:15, it's split into 2 versions moving through the building at the same time, and both of them are dangerous in different directions. The Guardian channel has decided I'm a sign made flesh. John Irun posts 3 separate times about the one who walks among us, and his followers have started leaving small offerings at the base of the north stairwell, the closest access point to my floor they know of. Like leaving food out for something they hope will keep protecting them and fear might turn on them instead. The other version moves quieter, through smaller private threads I only catch because I still monitor everything. Choi Deoksu and Ma Gyongho, who have spent a week treating each other as rivals for the same shrinking pool of desperate people, start a conversation neither of them has ever needed before. Choi Deoksu, private thread, 1 recipient. We should talk, not about territory, about the top floors. Ma Gyongho. 3 of your best men couldn't handle him. My guy watching 30 says 1 man walked in and put down 3 armed guys barehanded. That's not luck. That's training. And he's got resources neither of us have. Choi Deoksu. Agreed. Separately, neither of us takes that floor. Together, maybe. I read it twice, and something in my chest goes cold in a way the building's temperature has nothing to do with. A week ago, these 2 men would have let each other starve rather than share a stairwell. Now they're circling the same idea from opposite directions, and the thing that finally united them is me. I don't tell Jisoo or Yunchi yet. Some math doesn't get lighter by sharing it early, and I want to think it through before I hand either of them something to worry about I don't have an answer for. Yunchi finds me anyway, an hour later in the kitchen doing the same restocking that doesn't need restocking I do whenever my hands need work and my head needs quiet. She's gotten faster in the chair navigating this floor already, 3 days in, learning the doorways and thresholds the way she probably learned every unfamiliar building her whole life fast. Out of necessity, without asking for help she didn't need. You've got the face again, she says. What face? The one where you're doing math nobody asked you to do out loud. She wheels closer, stops near the counter, watches me fold the same gauze roll for the 3rd time without noticing I'd already folded it twice. You know you don't have to solve everything the second you find out about it. Some problems can wait until tomorrow's version of you deals with them. That's not usually how this works. Maybe it should be, sometimes. She reaches over, takes the gauze out of my hands before I fold it a 4th time, sets it down. You still haven't told me why you came down for me. I asked you 3 days ago. You said you were working it out. I still am. Well, work faster. I'm bored of being a mystery to the guy who apparently plans everything 10 steps ahead. There's no edge in it. If anything, there's something close to fondness, which is stranger to sit with than her anger would have been. I don't have a calculated answer for her, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I don't try to manufacture one. You had nothing I needed. No skill this place runs on. I went anyway, and I still can't build a version of my own logic where that decision makes sense, and somehow that doesn't bother me as much as it should. She's quiet for a second, then smiles small, real, the first one that isn't armor. Maybe that's the actual answer. Some things you don't do because the math works. You do them because not doing them would have cost you something the math doesn't have a column for. I don't know what to do with that sentence, so I just stand there, and for a few minutes, neither of us says anything else. And it's the first stretch of quiet since the seal that doesn't feel like waiting for the next disaster. The disaster finds us anyway, the way it always does, 3 hours later, when Jisoo comes in from the far side of the floor holding her tablet like it might bite her. You need to see this, she says. It's about Yeren. The name lands before the rest of the sentence does the resident on floor 6, the one Jisoo recognized on camera the day I pulled her out, the one with the 4-year-old and no specialist tag and nobody coming for her. Jisoo turns the screen around. It's a chat thread from floor 6, not the main channel, one of the smaller ones. Gyeongho's people have started running like an informal marketplace since the council's rationing tightened. Yeren's name is in it, alongside a transaction that isn't measured in money. Resident 6D. Anyone know what happened to Yeren? Saw Gyeongho's guys take her and the kid to the supply floor yesterday. She's not answering her door. Resident 6A heard she agreed to help process supplies in exchange for extra rations for her kid. Don't ask what processing means. Just don't ask. Jisoo doesn't say anything for a moment, jaw set the way it gets when she's holding something back that wants to come out as either grief or rage and hasn't decided which yet. She wasn't on the specialist list, Jisoo finally says. She didn't have a title that mattered to anyone. She had a kid and no leverage, and no one like you decided she was worth an extraction, so Gyeongho's people decided what she was worth instead. I didn't know. That's the point. Her voice doesn't rise, which somehow makes it worse. You know everything in this building. Every camera, every message, every deleted thread. You knew about a locksmith terrorizing a floor and a wheelchair being used as bait, and you found out about both of those in time to act. You didn't know about her because she never became a problem loud enough to trip whatever alarm decides who's worth your attention. That's the actual cost of how you run this. Not the people you save, the ones who never get loud enough to register. I don't have a defense for that because she's right, and building one would just be another manipulation aimed at the last two people in this building who still tell me the truth without flinching. I can't watch everyone, I say instead. I built systems, not omniscience. I know, I'm not asking you to be God. She sets the tablet down, quieter now, the anger burning down into something closer to exhaustion. I'm asking you to remember, every single time you decide someone's not worth the risk to save, that the version of this building where nobody comes for you is a version some woman 2 floors below us is living in right now. Don't let it become background noise just because it isn't loud. Yunchai, still in the doorway, doesn't say anything, but she reaches over and takes Jisoo's hand without being asked. And for a second, the three of us just sit with it. No plan, no manipulation, no ledger, just the fact of what this building actually costs, the people it doesn't protect. I go back to the Deoksu Gyeongho thread an hour later because grief doesn't stop the math, it just changes what the math is for. Choi Deoksu, if we move on the top floors together, we split whatever's up there. Food, medical, whatever power source is keeping those lights on. Equal shares, equal risk. Ma Gyeongho. And the guy himself? Choi Deoksu. Depends what he does when we knock. They're not planning it for tomorrow. Not yet. But 2 men who spent a week hating each other just found a third thing they hate more than they hate each other. And I know exactly how fast that kind of alliance can move once it decides it has nothing left to lose. I close the laptop and look at Jisoo and Yunchai, still sitting together across the room, and think not for the first time, but for the first time without immediately reaching for a plan to fix it, that whatever I build next has to be built to protect people, not just supply lines. The distinction didn't used to matter to me. It does now, and I don't fully know when that changed. Later, once the floor is quiet again, I pull up the building schematic and start marking names next to camera zones I've never bothered flagging before. Not threats, not assets, just people. Yeren's floor, the units around it, a dozen names with no skill this bunker was ever built to reward. I don't have a plan for any of them yet. I start the list anyway, because Jisoo's right about one thing I can't argue my way out of. A system that only notices people once they're loud enough to become a problem isn't protecting anyone. It's just triage with better lighting. I don't finish the list that night. I don't need to finish it to know it's the first thing I've built in this bunker that isn't for me. I've been watching Yoon Sarah for a week without her knowing it, and by hour 1:30 I finally have enough of her pattern map to understand what I'm actually looking at. She was a patrol officer before the blackout, the kind of job that in this city meant traffic stops and noise complaints more often than anything resembling danger. None of that explains what she's built in 8 days with no department, no radio dispatch, and no authority beyond whatever people choose to give her. She's turned 12 floors of frightened strangers into something that functions a rotating watch schedule, a supply sharing system that doesn't run on threats, and most recently, something closer to a rescue operation aimed directly at Ma Gyeongho's trafficking network. Resident 17B in Sarah's private coordination channel heard they moved 3 more women to the supply floor last night. Someone needs to do something, Yoon Sarah. Give me locations, not rumors. I'm not sending anyone in on a guess. That's the difference between her and every other name I've watched rise out of this chaos. Deoksu built a throne. Gyongho built a market. Sarah's building something that actually costs her more than it gives her, and she keeps building it anyway. She has courage and organization. What she doesn't have is intelligence real, verified locations, guard rotations, timing windows. I have all three, sitting in a database of camera feeds nobody else in this building knows exists. I could use her the way I used Gyongho against Doyun, the way I used the Guardian channel against Jaisok, feed her a target, let her do what my own hands can't, walk away clean. Something about this one sits differently, and it takes me longer than it should to name why. Those two used to be threats before I aimed them. She's the only person in this building actively trying to be what Deoksu only pretends to be. Using her doesn't feel like pointing a weapon. It feels closer to handing a firefighter better information about where the fire actually is. I tell myself that distinction matters. I'm not entirely sure it changes what I'm doing. I start small, testing the channel the way I tested every channel before it. A burner account. New, clean, no history connecting it to anything I've used before. Hyunrim_source3, floor 11, storage unit past the old laundry room. That's where they're keeping people before moving them to the market floor. 2 guards, shift change at midnight, 10-minute gap before the next pair arrives. I watch the camera feed at midnight because I need to know if this works before I trust it with anything bigger. Sarah doesn't send a crowd. She sends 3 people, quiet, fast, timed almost exactly to the gap I gave her. 4 minutes in and out. 2 women and a teenage boy walk out of that storage unit under their own power for the first time in 3 days. Ledger. Information supplied: 1 storage location, 1 shift pattern. Cost nothing measurable yet. Result: 3 people free, 1 operational hole in Gyongho's network he doesn't know exists yet. It's the first resource exchange I've made all week that doesn't cost me anything I can put a number on, and that unsettles me almost as much as it satisfies me. I keep feeding her. Not everything, not all at once enough to be useful, spaced out enough that no single leak looks too convenient on its own. A supply cache on floor 9, a guard rotation on floor 15. Each one costs Gyongho's operation a little more, and each one Sarah treats with the same disciplined caution, verifying what she can before she commits anyone. By hour 140, the biggest target yet comes across my feeds: a lieutenant named Oh Sang-chul, one of Gyongho's most trusted men, running what he's convinced himself is an untraceable holding operation 2 floors below the nightclub itself, close enough to Gyongho's own base of power that he's stopped bothering to hide it carefully. 6 captives. 4 guards. A location. Oh Sang-chul has told at least 2 people is impossible to find unless you already know. I know because I've watched him move supplies in and out of it on camera for 2 days. Hyunrim_source3. Floor 2, service corridor behind the old kitchen storage, past the walk-in that doesn't work anymore. 4 guards, but 2 of them leave for a supply run every night around 2 a.m. and don't come back for 40 minutes. That's your window. Sarah doesn't move on it immediately. She spends a full day verifying pieces of it through her own people first, which tells me she's careful in exactly the way that makes her hard to manipulate carelessly and easy to trust with something real. The raid happens on hour 143, and this time I watch the whole thing on camera, start to finish, because I want to know what it costs when the plan actually works the way it's supposed to. Oh Sang-chul is asleep when Sarah's team gets past the 2 remaining guards, quiet, efficient, no gunfire because none of them are carrying anything louder than a taser and a lot of nerve. He wakes up to a room full of people who used to be his property walking out the door he thought only he had the key to. Yoon Sarah, in her channel afterward, terse the way she always is when something's actually gone right. 6 out. No casualties on our side. Sang-chul's operation is done. He's not running anything out of that corridor again. Face slap, though nobody in this building will ever call it that. Oh Sang-chul spent 2 weeks convinced that his corner of Gyongho's empire was untouchable specifically because he'd hidden it well. He never learns that hidden well and hidden from someone who already sees every camera in this building are 2 very different things. The next morning, a different kind of message shows up in Deoksu's official channel, one that has nothing to do with Sarah, and everything to do with how frightened Deoksu has become of losing control of a building he only recently decided he owned. Choi Deoksu, 2 residents were found in possession of stolen medical supplies belonging to the council's emergency reserve. Given the severity of resource theft during this crisis, disciplinary action was taken this morning on the lobby level as a deterrent to further theft. There's a video attached. I don't watch all of it. I watch enough to understand that disciplinary action now means something Deoksu wants the entire building to see happen to two people whose only crime, as far as I can tell from the surrounding messages, was hoarding bandages for a sick relative. Jisoo watches the whole thing without flinching, which somehow disturbs me more than if she'd looked away. He's not doing that to stop theft, she says quietly. He's doing that because Sarah's making him look weak, and men like him only know one way to look strong again. Yoonchi doesn't watch the video at all. She hears the tone of the conversation from the next room and wheels in partway through, takes one look at both our faces, and doesn't ask to see it. I don't need the details to know it's bad, she says. Tell me what it means for us instead of what it looked like. It means Deoksu's scared enough of losing his own people that he's willing to make an example out of anyone convenient, I say. It means Sarah's winning quietly enough to threaten him without ever meaning to. Then he's going to come at her eventually. Not just Gyongho. Yoonchae says it plainly, the way she says most things that turn out to be right. Scared men in charge of something don't stay scared quietly for long. I don't have a counter for that, because it's exactly the shape of thing I'd have calculated myself a week ago. And hearing it from her instead means I'm no longer the only one in this apartment doing that kind of math. By hour 150, Sarah's success rate has started drawing attention she didn't ask for, not from Gyongho alone, but from her own people, starting to wonder aloud how she keeps knowing exactly where and when to hit. Resident 15C, her channel, not complaining, but how do you always know exactly which nights the guards rotate? That's not luck 3 times in a row. Sarah doesn't answer it in the channel. I watch her go quiet on the topic entirely for the rest of the day, which worries me more than if she'd made something up. A careful person doesn't ignore a good question. A careful person starts quietly trying to answer it herself before anyone else does. That night, for the first time since I started feeding her information, she doesn't act on the next tip I send. She just reads it and sits with it, and I can see on the message log that she's opened my burner account's profile 4 separate times, studying a blank page that tells her absolutely nothing, looking for a pattern in the one place I haven't given her one yet. Sarah figures it out on hour 156, and I know the exact minute she does because she stops using the tips entirely. I watch her lay it out for herself in a private note she doesn't share with anyone, the kind of thing a careful person writes when they want to see their own logic outside their own head. She's cross-referenced every location I've ever fed her against the timing of when each tip arrived, against who else in the building could plausibly have that information, against the fact that every single tip has been correct every single time with a precision that no rumor network in a blacked-out building has any business achieving. Yoon Sarah, private notes, floor 15 channel, unshared draft, 6 tips, 6 confirmed hits, 0 wrong locations. That's not luck, and it's not a lucky informant with a friend in the building. That's someone with access to information nobody down here has cameras, maybe, or something worse. Someone's been running this whole thing like I'm a tool they're pointing at problems they want solved without getting their own hands dirty. She's not wrong about any of it, and reading her work it out this precisely is somehow worse than if she'd never noticed at all. I don't send her another tip after that. I don't know yet whether silence looks more suspicious than continuing would have, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I don't have a clean answer. The Guardian channel, meanwhile, has its own math running, and it arrives at a very different conclusion about Sarah. John Arun lost his demon when Yezek died, and a religion needs a story that keeps moving forward or it starts eating itself from the inside. For a few days, his followers filled the gap with worship of me. The one who walks among us, but worship without contact, starts to feel thin fast, and Iraeon knows it. He needs something bigger than a sign. He needs proof, delivered on his terms, and he's found the perfect instrument for getting it. Guardian underscore of underscore the underscore flame. The woman who fights for us on the lower floors, she is known to the one above. He watches over her raids. He guides her hand. If we bring her to the threshold, he will come for her. And if he does not, then she was never protected at all, only useful to him. And the Guardian will show us what that means. It's a plan built entirely on a truth Iraeon doesn't fully understand yet, that Sarah has, in fact, been guided this whole time, just not by anything divine. He's building a trap out of a fact he's misread as a miracle, and that makes it more dangerous, not less, because he's about to test something real and call the result a sign no matter which way it breaks. They take her on hour 160, during what should have been a routine supply run to floor 19-6 of Irian's followers. Patient enough to wait until she's separated from her usual escort by a stairwell choke point I recognize from Doyeon's old checkpoint, the same geography, different owners now. I watch it happen on camera in real time, and there's nothing I can do in the 90 seconds it takes. She fights, I can see that much. One man goes down holding his jaw, another doubles over, but 6 against 1 in a narrow stairwell isn't a fight anyone wins on skill alone. And they've clearly planned for exactly this, coming with rope, not weapons, which tells me they don't intend to hurt her yet. They intend to keep her. Guardian _of_the flame, 20 minutes later, posted to the main channel for the whole building to see. We hold the one who fights for the lower floors. If the guardian servant above truly watches her, he will come to the threshold at the north stairwell, floor 7, before midnight. If he does not come, we will know exactly what she was worth to him, and the guardian will judge accordingly. 240 minutes on a clock I didn't set, aimed directly at a decision I haven't made yet. I don't tell Jisoo and Yoonchi immediately. I sit with the footage first, running the same math I've run all week, and for the first time it refuses to resolve cleanly. Every rational argument says stay hidden. I have exactly 2 known appearances behind me, the 14th floor rumor that stayed anonymous, and the 31st floor fight that didn't. One exposure was survivable because it happened fast and left before anyone organized around it. A second exposure walked deliberately into a trap 6 people built specifically to draw me out, in front of a growing religious following and 2 power-hungry men already discussing an alliance against my floor that's not an extraction. That's handing 3 separate enemies exactly the confirmation they need to stop guessing and start planning. The counter-argument doesn't come from a ledger. It comes from the fact that Sarah has spent 2 weeks building the only thing in this building that looks anything like justice instead of survival, using information I gave her, taking risks I engineered her into without her consent, and if I let her die at the bottom of a stairwell because the math says staying hidden is safer, I don't know what that makes the rest of what I've built here. I think about Yeren. I think about the list of names I started and haven't finished. Jisoo finds me before I finish deciding, because I've been staring at the same frozen frame of the stairwell footage for longer than staring at anything usually takes me. "That's Sarah," she says, reading the footage over my shoulder before I can stop her. Her voice goes flat in the way it does right before it doesn't stay flat. "They took Sarah. I know. You've been sitting here doing math instead of moving. The math doesn't resolve clean this time. Then stop waiting for it to." She grabs my arm, not gently. "You went down for Yoonchi with worse odds than this and less time to plan. Don't tell me the difference this time is that Sarah's useful to you, and that's suddenly a reason to hesitate. The difference this time is 3 factions are watching for exactly this. If I walk into that stairwell, every enemy I have learns my face, my methods, and roughly where my floor is all at once. And if you don't," Jisoo says, quieter now, but no less hard, "she dies believing you'd let that happen because the numbers didn't favor it. After everything she's risked on your word, without ever getting to choose that risk for herself." Yoonchi wheels in during the last of it, takes one look between us, and doesn't ask for the full explanation. "Whatever you're about to do," she says, "do it smarter than last time. You got lucky with 3 men in a dark hallway. 6 people who planned this in advance and are expecting you is a different problem, and you know it." She's right, and it's the first useful thing anyone said to me since the footage came in, not whether to go, but how. And I realize I've spent the last 10 minutes treating this like a binary decision when it's actually a planning problem. The one kind of problem I've never once let fear stop me from solving properly. "I'm not walking into that stairwell at midnight like they're expecting," I say, already moving toward the tactical maps I built for exactly this building months ago, for a version of this scenario I hoped I'd never need. If they want the guardian servant to answer a threshold, I'm going to make sure I'm the one who decides what that threshold actually looks like when I get there. Jisoo doesn't smile, not with what's at stake, but something in her shoulders loosens a fraction. Then stop staring at the footage and start building whatever that plan is. The clock's already running whether you're ready or not. I pull up the floor 7 schematics, the ventilation routes, the structural weak points I mapped years ago and never expected to use against people instead of just cataloging for insurance. And for the first time since this started, the plan I build isn't designed to move a threat somewhere else through someone else's hands. It's designed to walk in myself and walk back out with her. Ledger. 160 hours in, battery reserve holding steady, 6 followers of the Guardian, 1 hostage, 1 deadline set by someone who thinks he's testing a god. Would I actually have full structural knowledge of a stairwell nobody else has ever seen the blueprints for, and roughly 4 hours to turn that into an answer instead of a walk into their trap? Yunchi stays by the door while I work, quiet for once, watching me mark exit routes and drop points across a printed floor plan instead of trusting it only to a screen. "You're not going to just knock, are you?" she says eventually. "No." "Good," she says. "Bring her back." Jisoo doesn't say anything else either, just starts pulling trauma supplies into a bag without being asked, already assuming the version of tonight where someone comes back bleeding, which is its own kind of vote of confidence in what's coming. The version of me that went down for Yunche moved on instinct, 3 minutes of decision compressed into action before I'd finished thinking it through. This time I have 4 hours, and I use every one of them. The floor 7 stairwell, where Irian's people are holding her, sits at the intersection of 2 structural weaknesses I cataloged years ago and never expected to need a load-bearing corridor with a drop. Ceiling rated for exactly the kind of controlled collapse I used once already on floor 30, and a ventilation shaft that runs directly behind the utility closet the Guardian channel has been using as an unofficial gathering point since the blackout started. I don't need to guess where they'll keep her. 6 followers holding 1 hostage in a building with no working elevators means they stay close to the stairwell, close to their supply cache, close to the easiest exit if something goes wrong. People under pressure default to convenience even when they think they're being careful. I bring 2 things I've never used together before: a portable relay that lets me trigger the building's electrical systems from inside the shaft instead of remotely, and a recording rig I built months ago for a contingency I hoped I'd never need proof, in case anyone in this building ever needed convincing that I existed at all. That the man behind the lights was real and not just a story. Jisoo wants to come. I say no, not because I doubt her, but because the plan only works if exactly 1 person moves through that shaft, and a second body doubles every risk of being heard. Yunchi doesn't ask to come at all, she just holds my hand for a second before I leave. Longer than either of us is used to, and doesn't say anything performative about it, which is somehow more than any speech could have been. The shaft behind floor 7's utility closet is tighter than the one I used for Jisoo's extraction, built for a smaller service generation of this building, and by the time I reach the grate overlooking the gathering point, I've scraped both forearms raw against sheet metal edges I didn't have time to file down first. Sarah is exactly where I expected, tied to a support column in the center of the room, wrists bound, a strip of cloth over her mouth that she's clearly already worked halfway loose on her own, because 6 people who believe they're following a god apparently didn't think to check on their captive as often as they should have. She's bruised along one cheekbone, favoring her left side when she shifts, but her eyes are sharp, tracking the room, still working an angle even now. 4 of Iran's followers are present. 2 more are missing out on what I assume is a supply run or spreading word of the deadline further through the building. Iran himself isn't here yet. That's the piece of the plan I built everything else around. He wants an audience for whatever happens at midnight, and audiences take time to assemble. I have maybe 20 minutes before that changes. I don't come through the grate directly into the room. I trigger the relay first, killing every light on floor 7 except the one directly above the support column Sarah's tied to. The same trick that worked on 30 plunged the periphery into dark. Leave a single point of light that draws every eye toward exactly where I want them looking, while the actual movement happens somewhere else. Ledger. This operation cost me the floor 7 utility shaft as a usable access point once they realize how I got in. That route is compromised permanently. It cost me the relay, which I'll need days to rebuild a working replacement for. What it buys: the only version of tonight where she walks out instead of being carried out, or worse, not walking out at all. The dark buys me 8 seconds. I use 6 of them to reach the second man from the left before anyone registers movement, and the fight that follows isn't clean. The way the corridor fight on 30 was this room is smaller, more crowded, and I take a glancing hit across the ribs from someone swinging blind in the dark that I feel every time I breathe for the rest of the night. Sarah works her other hand free during the chaos, faster than I expect, and takes down the third man herself with a headbutt that would have put me on the floor. By the time the fourth realizes what's happening, it's already 3 against 1 in the other direction, and he runs the same way Baek Tae-jin's third man ran on floor 30 fast. And without looking back. We don't make it clean, though. Someone on the stairwell landing outside hears the commotion before we're fully clear, and by the time we reach the shaft entrance, at least one of Iron's people is close enough behind us to see exactly which panel I pull open and disappear through. That's the cost I didn't fully account for. Not just the shaft, the fact that now someone has watched the god of the top floors climb into a wall like anyone else. Proof that whatever I am, I'm not what 40 followers spent a week convincing themselves I might be. There's a second cost, worse than the first, that I don't learn about until we're most of the way back. A resident named Baek Soo-young, who's been quietly running supply relays for me between floors for the past week, someone I'd started, almost without noticing. Treating his staff instead of a stranger, was covering the far end of the shaft route as a lookout. A small role, low risk on paper. Irun's second missing follower, returning early from his supply run, finds him there instead of finding me. I don't learn what happens to Baek Soo-young until I check the cameras an hour later, back on my own floor. Adrenaline finally draining enough to let the number of things that went wrong tonight catch up to me all at once. He's alive. He won't be walking without help for a long time, and the shaft route he was covering is now known to at least one more person than it should be. Ledger, final tally, 1 compromised access route, 1 relay destroyed, 1 supporter seriously injured covering an exit I chose. 1 hostage returned alive. I don't know yet if that's a trade I'd make again, only that I made it and the price is already paid whether I decide it was worth it or not. Sarah doesn't say much on the walk back through the maintenance corridors, favoring her ribs, glancing at me sideways every few minutes like she's still assembling a picture that finally has a face attached to it. "You're the one who's been feeding me intel," she says, once we're far enough from floor 7 that talking feels safe again. Not a question. Yes, for 2 weeks. Every raid, every location, all of it came from you. Yes, she's quiet for another dozen steps. I spent 2 days trying to figure out if I was being used or being helped, and I never landed anywhere solid. Tonight, you climbed into a wall and took a beating to pull me out of a room full of people who think you're a god. That's not the profile of someone who only sees me as a tool. It's not one or the other, I say, because it's the truest answer I have. You were a tool the first time I sent you a location. You stopped being only that somewhere along the way, and I didn't notice exactly when. She almost laughs, though it costs her, hand going to her ribs. At least you're honest about it. Deoksu would have dressed that up as destiny by now. She looks at me directly, steadier now than the bruises should allow. I'm not walking into your bunker as someone you rescued, though. I've seen enough of how you operate tonight to know I'm not going to be a grateful guest who doesn't ask questions. If I'm in as someone who watches how you make decisions and pushes back on the ones I don't like. That's the only version of this I'd trust, I say, and mean it. By the time we reach my floor, Jisoo is already waiting with her trauma bag half unpacked, and Yunchai rolls forward the second the door opens. Relief written plainly across her face in a way she doesn't try to hide. 3 women now, 3 different reasons for being here, 3 different versions of what they expect from me going forward. I don't have a ledger entry for what that actually adds up to yet. For the first time, I'm not in a hurry to write one. It takes them 9 days to organize what should have taken them 1. And I spend every one of those 9 days grateful for their incompetence and preparing for the version of them that eventually gets it right. Deoksu brings what's left of his security detail and every resident he's coerced into civil defense duty. Gyongho brings the hardest core of his crew, thinned by 2 weeks of raids I engineered through Sarah, but still numbering more than either of us can comfortably fight bare-handed. What's left of Iran's Guardian followers smaller now, quieter since I climbed out of their trap through a wall like something they couldn't quite make sense of, bring the one resource neither of the other 2 factions has: explosives, scavenged from the underground parking structure's emergency stores, enough to open a hole in reinforced concrete if placed correctly. They come together on hour 188 up the north stairwell shaft. Timed for the dead hours after midnight when the building's noise drops low enough to hear a coordinated force moving with intent instead of panic. I've had 9 days to turn that stairwell into a trap I've walked in my head 100 times. Ledger, 188 hours in. Battery reserve down to 240 kilowatt hours after 9 days of preparation work. Food stores enough for 4 people for 11 more weeks, enough for a siege, not enough to also feed however many prisoners tonight might produce. That math will matter before this is over. The stairwell has 4 structural choke points between floor 38 and my sealed door, each one mapped years ago as a maintenance liability and reinforced quietly over the last week into something closer to a weapon. 2 are drop point sections of ceiling and support I can collapse on command, timed to separate an advancing group into smaller, disconnected units instead of one coordinated wave. One is a flood point tied into the water reclamation system, capable of turning 40 feet of stairwell into black ice within minutes if I open the right valve. The last is simply a choke point too narrow for more than 2 people to pass at once, which means whoever holds it decides who gets through and who doesn't. Sarah holds that last one because out of the 4 of us, she's the only one who's spent a career learning how to hold a line and mean it. Jisoo sets up the medical bay 1 floor back, trauma kit fully unpacked for the first time since I built it, quietly preparing for numbers she doesn't say out loud, but that I can see in the extra units of blood plasma substitute she pulls out and sets within easy reach. Yoonchi takes the communications post the one role in tonight's plan that doesn't require standing, monitoring every camera feed, and relaying positions to the rest of us through an earpiece, her voice the only thing keeping 4 separated people moving as one unit instead of 4 isolated fights. I hold the control room, one hand on the systems that decide who lives long enough to reach Sarah's line at all. The explosion comes first smaller than I expect, enough to breach a support wall 2 floors below rather than blow the whole structure, which tells me Iron's people know just enough about explosives to be dangerous and not quite enough to be efficient. Through it, the first wave comes fast, Ga Yongho's crew leading, weapons drawn, moving with the confidence of men who've never once faced resistance that didn't break on contact. I drop the first ceiling section the moment the lead 6 cross the marked line, and it does exactly what 9 days of engineering promised: 6 become 2. Cut off from the rest of the advancing force by a wall of rubble that won't clear in under 10 minutes, exactly the 10 minutes I need. Second wave incoming, they're routing around through the east stairwell. Yoonche's voice comes through the earpiece, steady despite everything. Sarah, you've got maybe 90 seconds. Sarah doesn't answer. She doesn't need to. I watch on camera as she holds that narrow choke point against 3 men at once, using the width against them the same way I use the dark against Irun's followers, forcing them to come at her one at a time, whether they want to or not, and one at a time. She's better than any of them. I open the flood valve when the 3rd wave crests the 4th floor of the stairwell, timed exactly to catch the mid-climb on a section already dropping below freezing from 9 days of unheated stairwell air. Water hits concrete and starts turning to ice in under 90 seconds. Men who were climbing confidently a minute ago are suddenly fighting gravity and their own boots. And the wave that reaches Sarah's choke point is half the size and twice as unsteady as the one that started it. Face slap, though none of them will ever hear it called that. 3 factions who spent 9 days convincing themselves that unity in numbers would finally break one man's floor walk into a stairwell that was never a stairwell. To me, it was a machine I finished, building specifically to take that confidence apart piece by piece. It isn't clean. It isn't a montage of traps working perfectly while nobody gets hurt. Jisoo's medical bay fills up faster than either of us wants 2 of our own supporters, residents from lower floors who volunteered to help hold secondary points, come back wounded badly enough that she's working with both hands steady and her voice completely flat, the tone she uses when panic would cost someone their life. By the time the assault breaks, an hour and 11 minutes after the first explosion, Deoksu's forces have scattered back down the stairwell in a retreat that looks less like tactics and more like men remembering all at once that they have families 2 floors down they'd rather not die away from. Gyongho's crew fares worse, the ice trap catches a 1/3 of them, and what's left retreats dragging more wounded than they came with. Irin's followers, the smallest group, lose the most proportionally, and somewhere in the wreckage of the second collapse point, I don't get confirmation either way on whether John Arayon himself is among the bodies or the ones who ran. We take 7 prisoners, 4 of Gyeongho's crew, 2 of Deoksu's coerced civil defense conscripts, 1 of Iron's followers, 2 injured to run with the rest. That's when the fight that actually matters starts, not the one in the stairwell, the one in my own living room, an hour later, with 7 bound, frightened, injured people locked in the storage room down the hall, and 3 women looking at me with 3 completely different expectations of what happens next. We can't feed 7 extra people for 11 more weeks, I say, because someone has to say the number out loud and nobody else in the room wants to. Every day they're here is food that doesn't go to the four of us or to the people I've started actually trying to track and help below. So what, you execute them? Jisoo's voice cracked sharp across the room, the first time I've heard her genuinely furious since the extraction that started all this. You calculate that their lives cost more than they're worth and solve it the way you solve Doyeon, except this time you don't even need a proxy. You just do it yourself because the math says so? I didn't say execute them. You didn't say anything, which from you usually means you're already 3 steps into deciding it. She crosses her arms, unwilling to back down. I have watched you point gangs and mobs at people for 2 weeks and call it strategy. I am not watching you do the same thing to 7 bound prisoners and call it necessity. They tried to kill all 4 of us tonight, Sarah says, quieter, but with an edge that surprises me, given how she spent the last 2 weeks pushing back on exactly the kind of unaccountable violence Jisoo's accusing me of considering now. I'm not defending execution. I'm saying there has to be a process, not a mercy release either, a tribunal, something that isn't just whatever the 4 of us decide to feel tonight. They're terrified, Yoonchi says, and her voice is the quietest of the 3, but somehow cuts through both of theirs. I looked at the feed while you were setting the last trap. One of them is maybe 19. He was crying before anyone even touched him. I'm not saying let them walk out the front door with a pat on the back. I'm saying don't let tonight turn all of us into the same thing we just spent an hour fighting off. 3 positions, 3 people I'd go through a wall for individually, none of them agreeing with each other, and me in the middle of it without a ledger entry that resolves any of it cleanly. Nobody's dying in that storage room tonight, I say finally, and it's not a calculation this time. It's the only thing I'm certain of in a room full of things I'm not. Beyond that, Sarah's right that we need a process. Yoonchi's right that we don't get to skip being decent because we're scared and tired. And Jisoo's right that I don't get to make this decision alone just because I'm the one who built the trap they walked into. Nobody looks fully satisfied. Nobody looks like they expected to be. It's the first decision I've made in this bunker with 3 separate people, insisting I answer to something other than my own math, and even unresolved, even messy. It feels less like a failure than every clean, solitary calculation that came before it. Down the hall, Yoonche's monitor pings a new message, priority flag, in the resident chat that's gone mostly quiet since the siege broke. Unknown sender, building-wide broadcast. This is Rescue Coordination Unit 4. We have detected your distress beacon. Ground evacuation convoy en route, estimated arrival 6 hours. All residents prepare for orderly evacuation at main entrance. The whole building lights up with it within minutes, the first hope this place has seen in over a week. And I'm the only person in it with the tools to check whether it's real before 2,000 desperate people walk out into the cold to find out for themselves. I don't trust the broadcast for exactly 4 reasons, and I know all 4 before the 6-hour countdown even finishes its first hour. First, any real military evacuation unit operating in this city would be broadcasting on a coordinated emergency frequency shared with municipal systems, not pushing a message directly into a single residential building's private chat network, a network that, as far as any outside agency should know, doesn't officially exist anymore since the city's own communications infrastructure went down 6 days ago. Second, the signal routes through a relay tower 2 districts over that I happen to know, because I spent 3 years quietly mapping every piece of infrastructure within broadcast range of this building, was decommissioned 18 months ago and never brought back online by the city. Something is using dead infrastructure to sound alive. Third, Rescue Coordination Unit 4 isn't a designation that exists in any disaster response protocol I've studied, and I studied every one of them exhaustively during the 10 years I spent preparing for exactly this kind of collapse. Fourth, and the one that actually turns my stomach, the broadcast specifically instructs residents to gather at the main entrance with all valuables and remaining supplies for inventory and safe transport. No real evacuation protocol on Earth asks starving, freezing people to bring their food with them to a triage point. That's not a rescue instruction. That's a collection instruction. Ledger. 6 hours until 2,000 desperate people walk out the front door carrying whatever's left of their food and medicine straight into something dressed up as salvation. I am the only person in this building with the tools to verify any of this before they do. I don't tell Jisoo, Sarah, and Yoonche right away. I spend the first 40 minutes doing what I should have done from the first message tracing the broadcast's actual origin instead of just its claims. It takes real work, routing through 3 layers of spoofed identifiers designed by someone who understood exactly how to make a signal look official to people with no way to check. What I find once I strip the layers back isn't a rescue unit. It's a convoy 6 vehicles, moving slow through the frozen highway system from the east, painted in a rough approximation of military markings that would fool anyone who's never actually served. Broadcasting on stolen emergency frequencies they've clearly used before, more than once, given how practiced the message format is. Raiders. The kind that learned, somewhere in the collapse of the last week, that rescue gets more compliance out of the desperate than surrender your supplies ever could. I bring it to the others in the living room, and for the first time since the siege, all 3 of them are quiet, in the same way at once not disagreeing, just absorbing it. They're going to walk 2,000 people out the front door for nothing, Sarah says finally. Voice flat with the specific fury of someone who spent 2 weeks keeping people alive only to watch a lie undo it in one broadcast. Straight into an ambush, carrying whatever food they've got left. Then we tell them, Jisoo says, like it's obvious, like it should have been the only conversation happening. Telling them means using an account that's traceable to me, I say, not a burner. My real identity, or close enough to it that anyone paying attention afterward puts the pieces together. The man from the top floors, the 1-3 factions already suspect exists, confirmed, publicly, by his own voice. So don't do it publicly, Sarah says. Use one of your burner accounts, debunk it anonymously, the way you've done everything else. I've already run that option and rejected it, and saying why out loud is harder than I expect. An anonymous account claiming a rescue broadcast is fake with no proof beyond trust me, competing against 6 hours of desperate hope people have been waiting an entire week for that doesn't win. People believe what they want to believe when the alternative is more freezing nights with no end in sight. The only way this lands hard enough to actually stop 2,000 people from walking into a trap is if it comes from someone they already believe exists. Someone with a face, someone who's already saved people in this building and has no reason to lie about this. Unche looks at me for a long moment. You're talking about finally being real, out loud, to the whole building. Yes, after 2 weeks of never once using your own name for anything. She says it carefully, watching my face. You know what that costs. Deoksu knows your face is real now after the siege. Jongho's people saw you in that stairwell. The second you say something publicly under an identity people can point to, you're not a rumor anymore. You're a target with a known location and a known voice. I know, and you're doing it anyway. They're about to walk into an ambush because a stranger with a stolen radio decided starving people are easier to rob if you call it rescue first, I say. I've spent 2 weeks pointing gangs and mobs and religions at problems, so my own hands stayed clean and my own risk stayed low. This is the first time doing that quietly costs more lives than doing it loudly would, so I'm doing it loudly. Jisoo doesn't say anything, but something in her face shifts, not approval exactly. Something closer to recognizing a person she wasn't sure still existed underneath 2 weeks of calculated manipulation. I post it myself, from my own account. First message I've ever sent under my own name into the resident chat that's been reading my manipulations for 2 weeks without knowing whose hand was behind any of them. Kang Tayo. The broadcast telling you to gather at the main entrance is not a rescue unit. I've traced the signal. It's routed through a relay tower that's been dead for 18 months, using a designation that doesn't exist in any real emergency protocol, and instructing you to bring your remaining food and supplies for inventory, which is not something a real evacuation ever asks for. This is a raiding convoy dressed up as help, timed to arrive while you're gathered, exposed, and carrying everything you have left. Do not go to the entrance. I will explain how I know this, and who I am after this building is safe. Right now, please just trust that I have never once lied to you about a threat, and I am not starting now. The chat goes still for almost 90 seconds, an eternity by the standards of the last 2 weeks before it erupts, faster and louder than anything since the blackout began. Resident 9E. It's him. It's actually him using his real name Resident 22C. How do we know this isn't the lie and the rescue is real? Yoon Sera, posting publicly under her own name for the first time in days. I can confirm this. I've worked with this source for 2 weeks. Every piece of intelligence he's given me has been accurate and has saved lives. I'm telling you as someone who has verified him under fire. Do not go to that entrance. That's the piece that turns it. Not my name alone, my name, backed by Sarah's, a police officer people already trusted long before any of this started. standing publicly next to a man half the building thought was either a myth or a monster 20 minutes earlier. The convoy arrives on schedule. 6 hours later, engines audible even through sealed floors, headlights sweeping the frozen courtyard where, in the version of tonight the raiders planned for, 2,000 desperate people should have been standing in the open with everything they own. Instead, the entrance is empty. Sarah's people, reinforced by residents who finally have something worth defending after 2 weeks of only surviving, hold position out of sight along the ground floor windows, waiting. Face slap, the loudest one yet. 6 vehicles of men confident that rescue is the easiest lie in a collapsing city walk up to a building that should have been standing wide open and gift-wrapped, and instead find a locked entrance, no crowd, and a defense that knew they were coming before they'd finished the drive. What happens after that isn't clean or cinematic, it's cold and messy, and costs Sarah's people more than any of us want, but by the time the sun comes up, 3 of the 6 vehicles are disabled. The raiders who survive are running rather than fighting, and not one resident who trusted the broadcast walked out into that courtyard to find out the hard way what inventory actually meant. By morning, the resident chat has changed in a way no manipulation could have engineered. There's no anonymous account posting half-truths anymore. There's a man with a name standing next to a police officer people already trusted, and a building full of survivors who watched a lie get stopped in time because someone finally decided telling the truth loudly mattered more than staying hidden. I sit with that fact longer than I expect to. 2 weeks of careful anonymity, undone in one message, and instead of feeling exposed, I feel something closer to the opposite, like the mask I'd built to survive this building has finally stopped being the only thing standing between me and the people in it. The aftershock comes on hour 2:12, 4 days after the convoy, when everyone in this building has finally started believing the worst might actually be behind them. It isn't seismic, not exactly. The engineers who built this city never designed for cold this extreme for this long, and steel contracts, concrete cracks, and welds that held fine in ordinary winters start failing all at once when the temperature differential between a frozen exterior and whatever residual heat remains inside finally exceeds what the structure can absorb. I feel it before I understand it. A groan running through the building's bones that doesn't match anything in my 10 years of preparation, followed 6 seconds later by a sound I'll hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. Floors 22 through 26 unreinforced, never part of my systems, never anything but ordinary residential construction come down on themselves in under a minute. Not the whole tower. Enough. Ledger. I don't have a number for this one. I don't want one. My sector holds. Every reinforcement I built over 10 years, the load transfers. The redundant supports. The system's designed for exactly the kind of stress a normal building was never meant to survive does precisely what it was designed to do, and 3 floors above a graveyard. We stand intact while hundreds of people 2 floors down don't. I don't process it as a victory. Jisoo doesn't either. She's down in the wreckage within 20 minutes, working triage with residents, pulling rubble apart with bare, freezing hands. And I follow with every medical supply I've kept in reserve for exactly this kind of catastrophe and never once let myself imagine using. Sarah organizes the search in shifts before anyone tells her to. Yunchi runs communications from a mobile relay I build her on the spot, coordinating rescue teams through the one channel that still works. Her voice the only steady thing in a building full of screaming and falling snow through a hole that shouldn't exist. We pull 41 people out alive over the next 6 hours. We don't pull out everyone. The anger comes the way I knew it would, once the immediate crisis passes and grief has room to look for somewhere to land. Resident 31D, public channel, 3 hours after the collapse. He had the money and the tech to reinforce that whole tower. We all know that now. He only did his floors. Hundreds of people are dead because he only ever cared about protecting his own. It's not entirely wrong, and that's what makes it land as hard as it does. I built for myself first, for 10 years, before 3 women and a series of accidents turned that into something closer to building for other people too. I don't have a clean defense for the fact that I could have done more earlier if survival had ever been the whole of what I was optimizing for. By nightfall, a crowd gathers at my sealed door, not organized the way Deoksu's siege was, not armed the way Gyongho's crew came, just grief with nowhere else to go. Dozens of people who lost someone in that collapse and need somewhere to put the unbearable weight of it. Some of them bring what weapons they can find. Most of them just bring their hands and their fury. I watch them through the camera feed, and for the first time since the seal went up on hour 0, I don't reach for a trap. They're not an army, Yunchi says quietly, standing beside my chair, watching the same feed. They're just people who lost everyone they had left. You could stop this the way you stopped everything else. Traps, tricks, another manipulation. You know you could. I know. So why aren't you? I look at the crowd a while longer before I answer, because the answer isn't fully formed until I say it out loud. Because every trap I've built in this building was for people trying to take something from me. These people already lost everything. Meeting grief with another clever trick isn't strategy anymore. It's just cruelty with better engineering. Jisoo, arriving from the medical bay with blood still on her sleeves from 6 hours of surgery, catches the last of it. Then what's the plan? I don't have one, I say, and for the first time in 212 hours, that admission doesn't feel like a failure. I'm going to open the door. Sarah, coming in behind Jisoo, stops cold. You're going to open the door to a crowd that's currently deciding whether to blame you for 4 floors of dead neighbors. Yes. Alone? No. I look at the 3 of them, each of whom has spent the last 2 weeks pulling me one careful inch at a time away from being a man who only ever calculated. With whoever's willing to stand with me while I actually try to explain myself instead of engineering my way around having to. None of them argue. All 3 of them follow me to the door. I open it myself, the first door in this entire operation I've ever opened without a plan behind it. And the crowd goes quiet the way crowds do when the thing they came to confront finally stands in front of them instead of behind cameras and rumors. I don't defend myself first. I say the thing I actually believe plainly without dressing it in strategy. I built this to survive alone. I was wrong to stop there. I can't undo the 4 floors we lost today, and I'm not going to pretend I did everything I could have to prevent it, because I didn't. I built for myself first. And I only started building for anyone else once people I couldn't calculate my way out of caring about made me. That's the truth, and you deserve it plain, not managed. Someone in the crowd shouts something about the dead. I let it land without flinching. I have food, water, and shelter enough for 4 people for months, I say. It's not enough for everyone in this building indefinitely. It's enough to keep this building's remaining people alive through the rest of this winter if we combine what's left of my systems with whatever's left of yours, organized properly, shared honestly, instead of hoarded behind either my door or Deoksu's supply closets. I'm opening my sector, not because it solves what happened today, because it's the only thing I have left to offer that isn't another calculation. It doesn't end the anger instantly. Grief doesn't work that way, and I don't pretend it does. But by the next morning, the resident chat carries something it hasn't carried in over 200 hours: coordination that isn't fear-driven, isn't built on threats or rumors or manipulated crowds, just people organizing shifts, sharing what's left, rebuilding something that looks less like a hierarchy and more like the actual meaning of the word neighbor. Deoksu doesn't survive the winter's remaining weeks, as anything resembling a leader his authority, built entirely on scarcity and fear, has nothing left to stand on once scarcity stops being managed by threat. Gyeongho's crew scatters or integrates one by one into a community that no longer has a black market worth running. What's left of Iryun's followers quietly stopped gathering once the thing they were worshipping finally stood in front of them and turned out to be simply a man. Weeks later, when the temperature finally starts climbing back towards something survivable, and the first real relief convoys, genuine ones, verified 3 separate ways before anyone believes them, this time reached the city, I stand in what used to be my sealed sector and is now, functionally, the operations center of a building that rebuilt itself instead of collapsing. Jisoo runs the medical wing full-time now, no longer treating me like a stranger who bartered for her life, closer to a partner who occasionally still calls me an idiot when I try to overthink something that just needs a decision. She hasn't called me a manipulator in weeks. She still watches me carefully whenever a hard call comes up, which I've decided I want, permanently, rather than tolerate. Yunchi runs the building's communications the way she always should have, not because the math ever justified her presence here, but because a building this size needed exactly the kind of person who insists on checking that the crying 19-year-old gets fed before anyone debates what he deserves. She's become, without anyone officially deciding it, the person residents come to when they need to be heard rather than managed. Sarah organizes what's left of building security and rescue coordination openly now, using intelligence I still gather, but shared transparently, discussed, agreed to, instead of slipped anonymously into her hands while she wondered who was pulling strings. The friction between her instinct for process and my instinct for expedience never fully resolves. It's become, instead, the thing that keeps either of us from drifting back into what we were before all this, her too rigid, me too willing to spend other people without asking. Was 10 weeks ago, a man alone on 3 sealed floors, watching 2,000 strangers through cameras, treating every one of them as either a threat, a resource, or a variable in a ledger only he could see. Is now the same 3 floors, doors open, run not as a fortress, but as the working center of a building that survived the worst winter in its history by finally admitting it needed more than one person's math to make it through. Late one night, long after the building has gone quiet in the ordinary way buildings go quiet instead of the frightened way, I go back through my own weather station's archived data out of habit more than need the same data set that gave me 4 hours of warning before all of this started. Buried in the pressure readings from the days before the collapse, there's a pattern I flag almost automatically, the way I flag anything statistically strange. A cooling curve that's too clean, too fast in exactly the places a natural system should have been chaotic, too stable in exactly the places weather never behaves. It isn't proof of anything. It's the kind of anomaly a careful person notices and can't quite explain away. I don't send it to anyone. Not Jisoo, not Sarah, not Yunchae. I sit with it a while, the way I used to sit with every piece of information before deciding how to spend it, and for once I don't spend it at all. I just close the file and look out at a building full of lights that are, for the first time in 10 weeks, lit by more than just my own preparation. Whatever caused this, natural or not, the winter it built is over, and the people who survived it built something out of the wreckage that no calculation of mine alone ever could have. That's the only ending this story needs tonight.